Okay, I want to try something a little different to kick things off. I want you to close your eyes.
Yeah.
No, seriously, humor me for a second. Picture a prairie.
A prairie. All right, I'm with you.
What do you see in your mind's eye?
Well, the classic image, right? You see tall grass, it's swaying in the wind, big, wide open skies, maybe a bison if we're feeling particularly romantic about it. But it's peaceful.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
peaceful. It's nature. It's wild. Now hold that image, the grass, that sort of untamed feeling, and I want you to mentally just drop it right on top of the grid of a major city.
Okay.
And I don't mean a park. This isn't Central Park. I'm talking about city blocks, pavement, sidewalks, fire hydrants. But the buildings, they're just gone, erased. All the noise, the traffic, the people, it's all gone. And all that's left is just silence and, weeds coming up through the cracks in the concrete.
Right. So you're not actually talking about nature. You're talking about the aftermath of something.
I am. I saw this term in the source material, urban prairie. And it stopped me cold. It sounds so poetic, but when you actually see pictures of it, like in parts of Detroit or St. Louis, it's haunting.
It is a haunting term.
It looks like the world ended, but only on that one block.
Well, and it's technically accurate. I mean, when the population density of a city drops so low that the land literally reverts to green space, not because we planned a beautiful park, but because there's no one left to live in the house or mow the lawn. That is the urban prairie.
And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're not just looking at abandoned buildings. This is more like a forensic investigation into the life and, well, the death of cities. Because that's what we're talking about, isn't it? It's a kind of death.
It is, but I'd argue it's not a natural one. It's not a city dying of old age. When a bustling, thriving metropolis becomes a ghost town, or a neighborhood becomes what planners call gray field land, that isn't some random accident. It's not bad luck. It's a process. It's a sociological process. It's a series of decisions, often made decades apart, that all lead to this one outcome.
That's the core tension I really want to pull apart today. Because, you grow up thinking cities are these permanent, monolithic things. Rome is the eternal city, right? New York is the city that never sleeps. But the material we've got today, it shows that cities can absolutely fall asleep.
They can go into a coma.
Yeah, or they can even die.
Exactly. And our whole mission for this deep dive is to really understand the mechanics of that. We call it urban decay or urban rot or blight. But those are just labels. We need to look under the hood at the gears that actually turn to crush a city.
And we're talking about, what, economic gears? Political?
All of the above. Economic, political, and social gears all grinding together.
And it's never just one thing, is it? It's never as simple as, the big factory closed down so everybody packed up and left.
No, never. That's probably the biggest misconception out there. It's never a single gunshot. It's always a convergence. It's deindustrialization colliding with a massive population shift, which then collides with a policy decision that was made 30 or 40 years earlier.
It's a perfect storm.
It's a perfect storm, exactly.
So we have a huge map to cover today.
Yeah.
We start by looking at the anatomy of blight. What does it actually look and feel like on the ground? Then we're going to get into the American model, which creates this very specific kind of weird donut shape of decay in the U.S.
And then we're going to flip that script completely. Because if you think urban decay looks the same everywhere, you are mistaken. We're going to Europe. We'll look at France and the U.K., where that whole map is basically inverted.
And the case studies. I mean, some of these are just, they're mind-blowing. There's a story out of South Africa in the notes that... Well, let's just say I had to read it 3 times to believe it was real. It completely redefines the word stealing.
Oh, the Johannesburg example is terrifying. It's what happens when the rule of law just evaporates.
I cannot wait to get to that. But first things first, Section 1, the anatomy of blight. When I say urban decay, I think we all have a sort of movie clip that plays in our head. Broken windows, graffiti, trash playing down the street.
We do. But let's zoom in on that image. The research mentions a really specific aesthetic. It talks about modern ruins. You mentioned the broken windows, but think about the texture of it all. There's a reference to a building in Poznan, Poland, and it describes these tiles that are cracked and just covered in layers of graffiti.
It's not just empty, it's scarred.
It's scarred. It's the visual language of neglect. It's like the building itself is screaming, nobody cares about me anymore.
And that's the critical link, right? The material points out that blight isn't just a physical thing, it's psychological.
It is. I mean, just imagine for a second you live next door to one of these condemned houses.
I've seen this. I've literally seen it. You have one house with a perfectly manicured lawn, And the house right next to it has a blue tarp on the roof, and the windows are boarded up.
Right. So what does that do to you day in and day out? It has a visual effect, sure, but the source says it has a physical and psychological effect. It creates this pervasive sense of abandonment. If your environment is literally degrading around you, you start to feel like maybe you are too.
It's a signal.
It's a signal that the social contract is broken.
It feels like being the last guest at a party that ended 3 hours ago. Like you missed the memo and you're not supposed to be there anymore.
That's a great way to put it. Now, if we look at the causes, and believe me, it is a laundry list, we kind of have to group them to make any sense of it. The first big bucket is, of course, economic. This is the bedrock of it all.
This is the no jobs part of the story.
It's even deeper than just no jobs. It's deindustrialization. So think about a town that was built entirely around a steel mill or a car factory. The mill closes. It's not just the steel workers who are out of a job.
No, it's the whole ecosystem.
The whole ecosystem. The diner across the street loses all its customers. The truck drivers who hauled the steel lose their contracts. The local government loses its biggest taxpayer.
So they can't afford to fix the potholes or keep the streetlights on.
Exactly. Then private divestment kicks in. The banks see the writing on the wall and they just stop lending money in that area. It becomes a death spiral. High local unemployment isn't just a statistic, it's the trigger for absolutely everything else that follows.
Okay, so the money leaves first. Then do the people follow the money?
That's the second bucket, demographic. And this is fascinating because it can actually go two different ways. On the one hand, you can have population decline depopulation. That leaves you with a city that was built for, say, 1 million people, but now only 500,000 live there.
So you've got all these schools and fire stations and bus lines.
Right.
But you don't have enough taxpayers to keep the lights on in any of them.
Correct. It becomes incredibly inefficient to even run the city. But paradoxically, you can also have overpopulation in certain pockets. If everyone who's left crowds into the few remaining affordable areas, you strain the infrastructure there until it snaps.
So the sewers back up, the power grid fails.
Precisely. You get a situation where it's a ghost town and a pressure cooker at the same time.
Wow. So it's either empty or it's breaking.
And that leads directly into the third layer, which is social. You see family fragmentation, you see the brain drain. I mean, anyone with a college degree or transferable skills, they're the first ones to leave.
Of course.
You lose what sociologists call social capital. Those are the networks of trust, the neighborhood watch, the people who know each other and keep the community functioning and safe. And into that vacuum,
crime rushes in.
Yeah.
Gangs, drugs.
That's the classic pattern.
There was one detail in this list of causes that I circled it in my notes because it genuinely freaked me out a little. It wasn't about economics or crime. It was about urban wildlife.
Yes. This is a very specific indicator of advanced decay.
And we're not talking about, like, a cute raccoon tipping over a garbage can, are we?
No, not at all. The notes specify large, unregulated populations of animals. Think abandoned pets.
Feral dogs.
Feral dogs forming packs. Now stop and think about what that signals. We spend thousands of years as a species building cities specifically to insulate ourselves from the wild. We build walls, we have animal control, we have streetlights. When you have packs of feral dogs roaming the streets of a major industrialized city,
the city has failed at its most basic function.
It has completely failed. It's not just sad or neglected at that point. It's genuinely hostile. You could be walking to the bus stop and have to worry about a pack of dogs. It's like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie, but it's real life in some of these blighted zones.
It just signals that all the structures of civilization, safety, sanitation, our basic dominance over the immediate environment have just dissolved. Okay, before we move on to the history of how this happens, I need you to explain one thing to me. The notes bring up this counterpoint from some libertarian economists, guys like Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek. And they blame something that I think most people assume is a good thing. They blame rent control.
This is a really important and, very controversial piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
The logic for rent control seems straightforward, right? Housing is expensive, people are poor, so let's put a legal cap on the rent. It sounds compassionate.
Yeah, of course. Keep it affordable so people don't get pushed out.
But Friedman and Hayek would ask you to look at it from the landlord's point of view. Let's say you own an apartment building. The roof is old. It needs to be completely replaced. The estimate is $50,000.
Okay.
But the government has a law that says you can only charge, say, $500 a month for each apartment because of rent control.
Right.
You do the math. You will never, ever make that $50,000 back. It's just not possible. So the question is, do you fix the roof?
I mean, no, I guess not. I'd go bankrupt if I did.
Exactly. You don't fix the roof, then the boiler breaks. You patch it, but you don't replace it. The plumbing starts to leak. The building just deteriorates. Eventually, it becomes unlivable.
And the tenants leave.
The tenants leave, or they stop paying rent and become squatters. You, the owner, just abandon the property because now it's a financial liability, not an asset.
So their argument is that by trying to keep the price artificially low, you actually end up destroying the supply of housing itself.
Yes, they argue that it completely freezes the market. New developers won't build there either because why would you? There's no profit to be made. So the existing housing stock rots from the inside out and no new housing gets built to replace it.
So a well-intentioned policy can basically become a machine for creating blight.
That's the argument, and it highlights how complex these forces really are.
That is. Yeah, that's some depressing math. But it makes a certain kind of cold, hard sense. Okay, let's pivot. We've got the ingredients of decay laid out. Now let's look at the recipe. And it seems there's no chef quite like the United States of America when it comes to this.
The American model, as it's known.
We call it the donut effect.
Right. And you should picture a literal donut. The doughy, tasty part is on the outside. That's the wealthy, growing suburbs. The hole is in the middle. That's the empty, decayed city center.
But it wasn't always that way. That's what's so strange.
No, absolutely not. Before World War II, the city was the place to be. I mean, the whole Industrial Revolution was about packing people in. You wanted to live close to the factory, close to the trolley line, close to the action.
So what happened? Did we all just collectively decide we liked having lawns and barbecue grills better?
It wasn't just a preference, it was engineered. After 1945, two absolutely massive things happened. The first, and maybe the most obvious, was the car.
The private automobile.
We shifted from a society built on public transportation, walking, trams, subways, to a society built around the private car. And the car just obliterates the traditional geometry of a city. Suddenly, you didn't need to be close to anything anymore. You could live 10, 20 miles out, have a big yard, a two-car garage, and just drive into the city for work.
But wait, cars are expensive. New houses in the suburbs are expensive. How did everyone afford this all at once?
And that is the second crucial factor. The government. We have this myth of the suburbs as this natural expression of the American dream, right?
Yeah.
Rugged individualism.
Yeah, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and bought my house with my own hard-earned money.
But the reality is that the federal government heavily, heavily subsidized that dream. The FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, and the VA mortgage aid for veterans, they completely revolutionized home lending. Before this, you might have had to put 50% down to buy a house.
50%. Who has that kind of money?
Almost nobody. But the FHA came in and introduced the low down payment, 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. All of a sudden, it became cheaper to buy a brand new house in a suburb like Town than it was to rent a cranked apartment in the city.
So the government basically built a giant slide leading out of the city.
Yes.
And then greased it with cheap money.
For some people. And that's a key point we'll get to in a minute. But yes, they pulled the white middle class out of the city like a giant vacuum cleaner. And to make sure they could get to and from their new suburban homes, they built the interstate highway system.
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure as a weapon. This is so important. We think of highways as things that connect us, but in the context of urban decay, they were escape routes. And more than that, they were often built by literally demolishing the city neighborhoods they passed through.
There's that specific brutal example in the notes about the Gowanus Parkway in New York.
Oh, it's a tragic story, and Robert Caro documents it beautifully in The Power Broker. You had the street, 3rd Avenue in Brooklyn. It was a bustling, working-class market street. It was vibrant, noisy, full of shops and people, full of life.
And
Then Robert Moses, the so-called master builder of New York, decided he needed an expressway to get people from the suburbs into Manhattan. And he didn't build it around the neighborhood. He didn't tunnel under it. He built it directly on top of it.
he put a roof over a living street.
A massive 6-lane concrete slab. The source material describes it so vividly. It says he cast the avenue forever into darkness and gloom.
Wow.
The noise from the traffic above was deafening. The sun was completely blocked out. The businesses on the street below just withered and died. The street life vanished. He literally shadowed a neighborhood to death, just so that suburbanites could drive over it more quickly.
That is such a powerful image. You're actively killing the city to serve the people who have just abandoned the city.
It's the perfect metaphor for the whole process. But now we have to talk about the people who couldn't leave, because this wasn't just about cars and highways, it was about race. We have to talk about the Great Migration.
This is the massive internal migration of African Americans we're talking about, right?
Yes. From the rural South to the industrial cities of the North. It happened in two major waves. The first was early, from about 1910 to 1930. But it was the second Great Migration, from 1940 to 1970, that was truly seismic. 5 million people.
5 million people on the move.
They were moving for factory jobs. They were fleeing the oppression of Jim Crow. They were looking for a better life. By the end of this period, something like 80% of Black Americans lived in cities. But when they arrived in Detroit or Chicago or Cleveland, they ran straight into a wall.
Institutional discrimination.
Remember those FHA loans we talked about? The ones that made the suburbs possible?
Yeah, the cheap mortgages.
Well, they weren't for everyone. The FHA had an explicit policy called redlining, and this is absolutely essential to understanding the American city. This wasn't just a couple of racist bankers. This was official federal policy written down in government manuals.
Can you explain exactly how it worked?
The government, through an agency, literally drew maps of every major city. They color-coded the neighborhoods based on perceived risk for mortgage lending. Green was good. These were new, white, affluent areas. And red was bad, hazardous.
And what made a neighborhood hazardous?
I have the quote right here from the 1938 FHA underwriting manual. It's shocking to read out loud. It says they need to protect against the infiltration of inharmonious racial groups.
Inharmonious racial groups. That's the federal government of the United States.
That's their language. If a single Black family moved into a white neighborhood, the FHA could declare that entire neighborhood red and refuse to insure any mortgages there. Banks followed their lead. No loans.
So let's just play this out. I'm a white WWII veteran. I get a cheap government-backed loan, and I move to a new house in the suburbs. I buy it for, I don't know, $5,000. Over the next 40 years, that house's value explodes. I build equity. I can borrow against it to send my kids to college, or I leave it to them as an inheritance.
Correct. That is the primary engine of white middle-class wealth creation in the entire 20th century.
Okay. Now, I'm a Black WWII veteran. I fought in the same war. But I can't get that loan. I'm forced to stay in the city. I probably have to rent. Or maybe I manage to buy a house in one of those redlined areas. But because no banks will lend there, the property value never goes up. In fact, it probably goes down.
That's right. You gain zero equity. You might even lose money. You can't get a loan to fix the roof when it starts leaking because the bank looks at the map and says, sorry, you're in a red zone. So the house decays.
So you fast forward to today. The white family has inherited a $500,000 asset. The Black family has inherited nothing, or maybe even a liability.
That is the brutal, simple math of structural inequality. It's the power of compound interest, but for discrimination. Redlining didn't just segregate where people lived, it segregated their financial futures for generations. It systematically stripped the inner city of all its capital.
And when you strip the capital, and the industrial jobs leave, and the white population flees to their subsidized homes,
you get the American model. Poor, decaying, predominantly minority inner cities, surrounded by rings of wealthy, predominantly white suburbs. It was a machine designed, intentionally or not, to create slums.
Wow. Okay, so that is the donut.
Yeah.
And it feels so ingrained, so permanent. Like that's just how American cities are supposed to look. But the research says, no, not at all. Look at Europe.
This is where it gets really, really interesting. We call it the European inversion.
The inversion.
If you go to Paris or Vienna or Rome or many of the great European capitals, the map is completely flipped on its head.
So where do the rich people live there?
They live right in the center.
Sure.
The historic core, the first arrondissement of Paris, right by the Louvre. That's where the money is. That's where the power is. The apartments there are astronomically expensive.
So where's the decay? Where is the blight?
It's on the edge. It's in the suburbs. In France, they call them the Banlieues.
I always thought banlieue was just the French word for suburb.
Linguistically, yes, it is. But culturally, it carries an incredibly heavy weight. It's become synonymous with poverty, with immigrants, with crime, and with social exclusion.
How did that happen? Why didn't they get the nice, leafy, single-family home suburbs that we got?
It's just a completely different history. In the post-war era, The 50s and 60s, France had a massive housing crisis. They needed to build housing, and they needed to do it fast, so they built these enormous projects called grands ensembles.
What were they?
Huge, modernist, concrete high-rise towers. And they built them way out on the periphery of the cities where the land was cheap.
And at first, people liked them.
Oh, yeah. At first, they were seen as a huge step up. They had indoor plumbing, heating, electricity. It was much better than the shanty towns and slums many people were living in before.
But there's always a but.
But by the 1980s, the industrial jobs in those areas started to dry up. The white-collar, middle-class French stayed in the beautiful city centers. And these high-rises became essentially warehouses for the unemployed, and increasingly for immigrants from France's former colonies in North Africa, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia.
So instead of a white picket fence in a backyard, the suburb in the French imagination means a giant concrete tower block and a sense of isolation.
Yes, exactly. And the notes talk about a deep, profound social stigma attached to these places. There's this feeling that these areas are outside the law, or even, quote, outside the republic.
That phrase gives me chills, outside the republic. It's like saying, you're not really French if you live here.
That is precisely the feeling it conveys, and it creates a pressure cooker. The notes, of course, mention the 2005 riots that spread across France.
I remember seeing that on the news. All the cars on fire. It was shocking.
And it started when two teenagers who were running from the police hid in an electrical substation and were accidentally electrocuted. They died. And that tragedy was the spark. But the fuel was decades of frustration, unemployment, and feeling trapped in these concrete islands on the far edge of the city.
So the U.S. burns from the center out. France burns from the edges in.
It's the perfect inversion. Now let's hop across the English Channel to the UK. Is it the same story there?
Well, London feels a lot like the Paris model. Super, super expensive center, and the poverty is pushed further out.
London is its own unique beast. But for the UK as a whole, there's a different kind of divide. It's not just center versus suburb. It's north versus south.
The regional divide.
The urban decay in the United Kingdom is heavily concentrated in the old industrial heartlands of the north. Cities like Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle. These were the engines of the British Empire. Coal, shipbuilding, textiles.
And I'm guessing when the empire stopped needing as many ships and as much coal.
The economic floor just fell out from under those cities. The notes mention the big slum clearances of the post-war era. They tore down a lot of the old Victorian terraced housing and built high-rises, a bit like the French model, but the economic collapse was just too severe.
There's a pop culture connection here in the notes that I absolutely love. The idea of a soundtrack to this decay.
You really can't understand British urban decay in that era without listening to a band like The Specials, their song Ghost Town.
Oh, it's the ultimate anthem for this. This town is coming like a ghost town. It's so bleak.
It is. It's haunting. Or The Jam, with a song like Down in the Tube Station at Midnight. These songs from the late 70s and early 80s, they perfectly captured that mood. Gray concrete, the constant threat of violence, mass unemployment. It was a very specific flavor of despair.
There's a really interesting data point here in the material comparing Manchester and Newcastle.
Yes, this is crucial because it helps us check our assumptions. In the U.S., we talk so much about race and redlining, and for very good reason. But look at the U.K. during this period. Manchester had a growing non-white immigrant population. Newcastle, on the other hand, was overwhelmingly white.
And yet,
both cities suffered catastrophic urban decay.
So it proves that while racism can absolutely pour gasoline on the fire, the root cause, the fundamental economic collapse, is colorblind.
Exactly. When the factory closes its gates for the last time, the city dies. It doesn't matter what the people who live there look like. The economics of it are just brutal and universal.
Speaking of brutal, I think it's time we get into the case studies. Section 4, Failed Utopias. These are the stories that show how weird and extreme this whole process can get.
Which one do you want to start with?
Let's start in Italy, in Naples, the Ville di Scampia.
The Sales of Scampia.
Sounds so beautiful, doesn't it? The sales.
And it was meant to be beautiful. This is a classic tragedy of modernist architecture. It was built in the 60s and 70s. The architect, a guy named Franz de Salvo, had this grand utopian vision. He wanted to create a self-sufficient small city right there in Naples.
Can you describe what it looks like?
Imagine these huge triangular slab buildings. They genuinely look like giant concrete sails billowing in the wind. They were supposed to have these shared walkways connecting them, parks, their own train station. The whole idea was to use architecture to force community interaction.
We will build a perfect community with concrete, a classic modernist dream.
The ultimate dream.
Yeah.
But then, reality crushed the party. First, in 1980, there was a massive earthquake.
The Irpinia earthquake.
It left thousands and thousands of people homeless, so desperate families just started moving into the Valle. They became squatters. The perfectly planned community became a massive refugee camp almost overnight.
And what did the government do? The police?
The government largely abandoned it. It was too big of a problem. And in Naples, when the state retreats, who fills the vacuum?
The Camorra. The local mafia.
The Camorra took over the entire complex, and ironically, that utopian community architecture, the complex maze-like passageways, the lack of clear roads, it made the buildings the perfect fortress for the drug trade.
So police couldn't get their cars in.
Exactly. Police couldn't get in. Lookouts could be posted everywhere. The architect designed a walkway for neighbors to stop and chat, and the mafia used it as the perfect spot to sell heroin and watch for cops.
That is the ultimate failure of what they call architectural determinism.
Yeah.
You can't design your way out of a social collapse.
Not a chance.
Okay, from the heat and chaos of Naples, let's go to the cold, quiet emptiness of Eastern Germany. The shrinking East.
This is a completely different kind of decay. This isn't about crime and overcrowding. It's about silence and absence.
The case study here is a town called Hoyerswerda.
Hoyerswerda. Since the reunification of Germany in 1990, its population has dropped by 40%.
Nearly half the town is just gone.
And specifically, it's the young people, especially the young women. They left for jobs and opportunities in the West. The birth rate just collapsed. It's a textbook case of what demographers call urban shrinkage.
And what's left behind? What does it look like?
Well, you have the Plattenbau. These are those prefab concrete slab apartment blocks that the East German socialist government loved to build. They were fast, they were cheap. But the notes mention something really eerie about the East German approach to history and architecture.
Yeah, this part was strange. It says that in some places, they just left the rubble from World War II where it fell.
It's bizarre, isn't it? In West Germany, they were obsessed with rebuilding everything, the economic miracle. In the East, if a building was bombed out in 1945, sometimes they just left it. Or they cleared the lot and just left it empty for 50 years. If a building didn't fit the new socialist ideal, they just let it rot.
So you could be walking through this town today and see a mix of ugly concrete blocks from the 70s, empty lots, and a pile of bricks that's been there since the war ended.
It's a landscape of overlapping traumas, and now it's emptying out completely. It's a ghost town happening in slow motion.
Okay, those are both incredibly heavy. But the South Africa story, Hillbrow in Johannesburg, this is the one that felt like it was ripped from the script of an action movie.
Hillbrow is something else entirely. To understand it, you have to understand the transition out of apartheid. Under apartheid, Hillbrow was a whites-only, high-rise, very affluent neighborhood. It was kind of the Manhattan of Johannesburg.
So cool cafes, bookshops, beautiful high-rise apartments.
Exactly. Then, 1994, apartheid falls. A democratic government is elected.
And naturally, people start to move.
The white residents flee to the suburbs. It's a classic white flight story like we saw in the U.S., but on hyperspeed. They were replaced by low-income black workers and a huge influx of immigrants from all over Africa, all looking for a foothold in the new South Africa.
So far, that sounds like a fairly standard, if rapid, urban transition.
It is. But then comes the phenomenon of hijacking.
You have to explain this term. How on earth do you hijack a 30-story skyscraper?
This isn't like hijacking a car. This is organized crime syndicates targeting a specific apartment block. Imagine you're a legal resident there. You come home from work one day, the locks on the front door are changed, and there are men with AK-47s standing in the lobby.
And they just say, this is our building now.
Basically, they drive out the official property management company. They intimidate the legal registered owners of the building until they're too scared to ever come near it again. Then the gang becomes the de facto landlord. They go door to door with guns and collect the rent from everyone.
But I'm guessing they don't use that rent money to pay the bills.
Of course not. They pocket all the cash. They don't pay the municipality for water. They don't pay for electricity. So after a few months, what does the city do?
They have to cut the power and the water.
Right. So now you have a 30-story glass and concrete tower. There are no elevators. There are no lights in the hallways. There is no running water.
Oh my God, the sanitation,
Well,
smell.
people are literally throwing their trash and human waste out of the windows. It creates what's known as a vertical slum. And it's terrifying because it shows just how fragile the whole system is. We assume if we have a deed to a building, we own it. But if the police won't come and the courts are paralyzed, that piece of paper means absolutely nothing.
It's pure anarchy. It's the total collapse of the rule of law, but contained within the four walls of a single building.
Precisely that.
Okay, we've seen the donut, we've seen the Banlieues, we've seen the hijacked tower. I feel like I need a shower and a stiff drink. But we have to ask the big question at the end of all this. Can we fix it?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question.
Yeah.
And the history of fixing urban decay is, in some ways, almost as tragic as the decay itself.
Let's talk about the big American solution, urban renewal, with a capital U and a capital R.
In the mid-20th century, the U.S. strategy was brutally simple. The neighborhood is the problem, the old buildings are the problem, so knock them all down.
Slum clearance.
Get the bulldozers. They leveled entire neighborhoods, displacing thousands of people, and they replaced them with massive projects, the most infamous of which is Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis.
Pruitt-Igoe is the poster child for failure.
It is the absolute Titanic of public housing. It was built in the 1950s. It was huge. It was modern. It won architectural awards. But they didn't provide any funding for maintenance. They packed it with the city's poorest residents and completely isolated them. It became a zone of intense crime and poverty almost from the day it opened.
And how did that story end?
It ended with dynamite. By the 1970s, the government admitted total defeat and just imploded the buildings. You've probably seen the footage. It's this iconic slow-motion demolition that came to symbolize the death of that whole utopian idea of public housing.
So the expert consensus now is that urban renewal, that whole bulldozing strategy, was a complete failure.
Largely, yes. The source material calls it misguided. Because when you bulldoze a slum, you aren't just destroying rotting buildings, you are destroying a community. It might be a poor community, but it's a community with social networks. You scatter those people to the winds, you don't solve the problem of poverty, you just move it somewhere else.
So if the government can't fix it with bulldozers, what about the free market? What about gentrification?
Gentrification, the word that everyone loves to fight about online.
The source calls it a double-edged sword.
And it absolutely is. On the one hand, it is the primary means of a natural remedy. Capital flows back into a neighborhood, buildings get fixed, the roof that was leaking for 20 years finally gets repaired, the tax base recovers, the city financially stops dying.
But the other edge of the sword.
The people who live there, through all the hard times, they get priced out, their rents skyrocket. The corner store that's been there forever gets replaced by a boutique coffee shop selling $12 lattes.
And this leads to this fascinating new phenomenon that's mentioned in the notes, the decay of the inner suburb.
Yes, this is so important for understanding where we're heading now. As the city centers get wealthy and gentrified again, think about Brooklyn, think about downtown LA. The poor are pushed out, but where do they go?
They go to those first-ring inner suburbs, the ones that were built in the 1950s.
Exactly. The Levittowns of the world, the places that are now 70 years old. The infrastructure is aging. The shopping malls are dying. Poverty is migrating from the urban core to that first suburban ring.
So the donut is slipping again? The hole is turning into the donut?
The hole is filling up with gold, and the dough is starting to go moldy. It's this constantly shifting geography of poverty.
Are there any success stories? Is anyone actually doing this right?
Well, Europe offers a slightly different model, which is often called new urbanism.
What's that?
Europe has a built-in advantage. Their cities have good bones, they're older, they have those dense, walkable, historic quarters.
Right. It's a lot easier to fix up a charming 19th century brick row house than it is to fix up a decaying 1970s strip mall.
That's it, exactly. People want to live in the row house. So in a place like Holme in Manchester, they've gone through this incredible three-stage cycle.
Walk us through the Holme timeline.
Okay. Stage 1, 19th century working class housing, kind of slums, but a traditional street grid. Stage 2, the 1950s and 60s, they bulldozed it all and built those awful concrete high-rise towers. Total disaster.
And Stage 3.
The 1990s, they finally admitted the towers were a catastrophic mistake, so they bulldozed the bulldozed neighborhood again. And what did they build in its place?
Let me guess. Did they basically go back to Stage 1?
Pretty much. They built what are called new urbanist developments, traditional-style houses, mixed-use buildings with shops on the ground floor. They put the street grid back, low-rise, human-scale building.
So we spent 50 years and billions of pounds just to realize that the Victorians kind of had it right in the first place.
In terms of urban geometry, yeah. It turns out humans like human-scale places. We like streets, we like corner stores. We do not like vast, windswept concrete plazas between identical towers.
So let's try to wrap this all up. We've been all over the world. We've looked at the ruins. What is the big overarching takeaway from all this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that a city is not a statue. It's not a fixed thing carved out of stone. It's a flow. It's a living, breathing organism.
Metabolizes.
It metabolizes, exactly. Money flows in, money flows out. People move in, people move out. Policies shift the currents. It's this constant cycle. Construction, flight, decay, and then, if you're lucky, rebirth.
But we have to remember the human cost of that cycle.
Always. When a city sheds its skin like that, real people get hurt. Generations of family wealth are wiped out. Communities that took a century to build are scattered in a decade.
There's one last concept in the notes that I just want to leave everyone with. It's the idea of ruin porn.
Yes. The Instagram aesthetic.
Right. People who travel to Detroit or the abandoned resorts in the Catskills just to take these beautiful, artistic photos of the decay. It's clear we have a deep fascination with it.
We do. We find a strange beauty in the failure. It's romantic in a way. But I would challenge everyone listening, don't just look at the photos online. Look at your own city.
Yeah. Next time you're driving home from work, actually look out the window.
And ask yourself, what stage of the cycle am I seeing right now? Am I in the American donut? Am I seeing the French Banlieue model?
And look really closely at those suburbs. The strip malls with half the storefronts empty. The aging apartment complexes. Are we witnessing the quiet birth of the suburban prairie?
That is the question for the next 30 years.
On that cheery note, this has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for exploring the ruins with us.
Keep looking closer.
We'll see you next time.